Hi, I'm Jaap. We thought as first generation Australian Van Bentums and our future generations, it was important to find out how we came to be in Australia. So, to begin, what was it like growing up in Holland before the war?
Yeah, it's something that I never really dwelled on. It just was part of our existence. Really, it was an easy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Bakery, backyard, shop, customers coming in, family calling in. Yeah, I remember that as a good time, but
Yeah.
nothing really stands out, highlights that I can think of now.
What about all the brothers and sisters that you had? How was that?
Yeah, that only when we were teenagers, that mainly Andries and I would sometimes have a bit of a yarn to each other. Look at Mum, another one on the way. But that would have been 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
We wouldn't, before that we would have never noticed.
Because big families were normal in Holland.
Yeah, you wouldn't observe your mum and dad in that way.
No.
And Mum was fairly tallish, and it didn't bob out.
Yeah.
It was just sitting there, and it was just slightly extending.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Mum's room was being gotten ready.
Yeah.
And we already knew that was Mum's room, and I'm pointing that way because that's how the house was.
Yeah.
In the middle was the shop, and on the other side was a big lounge room, which what we called the seats room.
Okay.
But nothing to do with the seat, but that's how we as kids seen it.
Yeah.
But that's where most of the family activities and get-togethers. And then behind that was the keuken, you know, the kitchen where we had our meals.
Yeah.
And that coffee and tea was drunk, and in the winter time especially, when there was heat, because we had different heaters called haardkachels, and then you had to have the coal or the wood, but the harden, which is that thing that they put in corners, looked very nice, but it only really worked with coal and not with wood.
Okay.
We did put wood in it towards the end, but there was no coal available. And I'm talking about the wartime.
Yeah.
But in my younger years, till I was 14, and there was no war yet, that's how we grew up, and that's how I remember those things.
Yeah, okay, that's good. The kids all in the house together, you all slept in, a lot of you slept together in beds and stuff?
Yeah, we generally had double beds, and when the kids were very small, I remember there was one bed, fairly big bed, what I thought at that time, that there might have been 3 in there.
Yeah.
But generally double beds, single beds. I think later on when the girls grew up, then Jans and Leni were in a separate room. Dan de Sint was in another room. There was the 2 on the right side of the house.
Okay.
And they would have had single beds, but I can't even remember what those beds looked like. Never really looked at it.
How many bedrooms were in the house?
And then there was 2 on the other side, and then a big overload, what we called, like a zolder. And eventually, when Mum and Dad had more and more kids, then the kids were in that big, what was a very big bedroom. They put another room in front of that, partitioned it off on the zolder, and it became a double bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite roomy, and so they slept, so to speak, separate, but only had to open the door and could hear the kids, the babies, whatever, to attend to them. And then behind that was another bedroom, and when we grew up, and Oma Breur was still with us. So now I'm talking when I was 6 or 7 years old. Oma Breur had married, but split up with Tante Cor, and came back home again. And home was his brother and sister-in-law. So he had to have a room by himself. So Tante Sint had her room, Oma Breur had his room, and the rest, but then talking about the 30s, there wouldn't have been 14 then.
No.
there was only 5 or 6, 7.
Yeah.
Your father was 7.
Yes.
So the pressure wasn't that much. Later on, in the back of the house where the bakery was, above that was a big zolder, which was a couple of steps down, and then you would go into that. Above that was a whole big area which they made into another double bedroom. So they petitioned off a section of that with plywood,
Yeah.
door in it, a double bed on that side and double bed on that side. So then 4 boys, Andries and I on that side, and Gerrit and Frans on the other side, or that way, I can't remember.
Mm.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
So there was a catering for 4. While the girls were in the front house, and we were in. That also gave us, with an open door on top, to a balcony, or a, what do you call the platform? Something,
Platform, yeah.
which was the roof of the bakery down below. So the bakery was extended out of the main house, and a couple of meters built out. On top came a flat roof. So a door was created in the roof of the old house, and we could step out. So we often, especially in summer, we slept at the open doors, and it was nice and cool, bit of ventilation. And so that was the privilege of sleeping there and having the access. And then you looked over the backyard and the trees and
Yeah, I saw that in
the
some of the
way
photos.
our block of land was
Yeah,
situated.
I see that in some of the older photos, the trees.
Yeah, there was 2 or 3 apple trees down the back, and a big perenboom, a pear tree, closer to the home. And underneath was a big shed for the chickens, because we always had chickens and around, and a little piggery, which was next to the chickens, all along the fence of our neighbours.
So did things change when the war came, or did everything stay the
Oh,
same?
we just continued on, but things became stricter. There was all rules and regulation came in from the Germans. They call it the Germans, but it was the Dutch government who was installed by the Germans. They set all sorts of regulations and restrictions on your comings and goings. That wasn't so noticeable in the beginning, but it got more severe as the war drew on and things developed. But again, as kids, I never seen it as being bad. You know, I never really.
You never saw fighting or anything?
No, never. The only thing that we would hear coming over a lot of planes from England, that was 42, 43, 44, bombing Germany. But sometimes there was all sorts of anti-aircraft guns everywhere through the country, but we didn't know where they were. They would now and then shoot down one of those bombers, and they would fall down. But the only one was about 2 kilometers out of town. Air fighters would come down, and the railway line was there, and I think they were after immobilizing, that was the English, immobilizing the German transport system. So the railways was very important. And so then they bombed that, but they weren't too accurate, and 3 or 4 houses on either side of the line got flattened, and a number of people got killed. But that's the closest that actually what happened in Ermelo. That people through the war effort directly got killed. But war as such, no. With troops towards the end, when the liberation came in, that the Allied troops came from the south, from Belgium through parts of Holland, and to go north to Groningen and then into Germany towards Hamburg. And some of those troops were in Ermelo. Then the Canadians were the main section of the Allies, and they pushed out the Germans, so said a day or 2 before the Germans would retract and go away wherever to, we didn't know that. And then the Allies came in with their tanks and their material, and they were then our liberators, and received as such, because by that time things were very tight and desperate. Not so much for us personally, but in Holland overall. And then I mean the cities, you know, they had no food. Transport was not there. So if there was food in some sections of Holland, it just didn't get to the cities. You had to go and get it, which people did by walking, pushing prams, buckfeets, whatever transport they had, and go a few hundred kilometers to the north, where there was still plenty of food. And one who was involved in that was Oma Dirk, you know, married to Tante Lida, sister of Mum. We were sort of halfway Den Haag and Groningen, Friesland, that he would stay with us then for the night, and then the next morning they went on again to whatever contacts he had in the north, and on the way back the same. And then he had his bags full and all sorts of boxes on his, all on the bike, with speck and boter and whatever they picked up and could transport.
Okay.
That couldn't be milk or anything,
No.
it was too bulky.
No. Did Opa keep the bakery going all the way through?
Yeah, but again, because of restrictions in production, the flour in Holland never was self-sufficient in growing enough for Holland. There was an organization that came from the government who regulated all this food. So at a given time, a lot of that imported food was coming to the bakers. And we had hundreds of bags of flour, again on that zolder, for emergencies. We're not supposed to use that, but when emergency came and there was no ordinary flour available, that was then the standby. And that was there for quite some time, but then came the end of the war and no more supplies came in. Then we were allowed to use that, so all that flour eventually was being used in the bakery, and it was mainly from Canada, because they had all English names on it. And Mum, after that, had used the flour, and we opened those bags carefully that they were not torn. She would then rip it all up in a nice open way, and that became underwear. Little hempies, or singlet, call it singlet. So we had a lady who was an, what do you call that? Seamstress, Tante Koba, and so all that material was washed and bleached, but some of the lettering of the companies who would produce that flour was somewhere still to be seen. And so they made some singlets and underwear out of that for the girls, maybe petticoats or whatever that was being used.
Okay.
So that was one of the side effects of that. And necessity of, there was nothing else. Everything was rationed. You know, you were getting what they call coupons. So much for butter, so much for all the hard to get things. And textiles and shoes was one of those things. You know, you would get, say, one pair of shoes every 12 months. From that organization, so you had to go in, stand in queue, collect your rations, and then go to the shop where they might have them. So there was another thing. So the trade was very restricted and very hard to get, maybe especially because we had a big family. But then again, we had, I think, a lot of consideration of the neighborhood and some of those shopkeepers. You know, help Jan and Lena with all their kids.
That's good. So obviously after the war things got a bit tight and things didn't come back to normal. So then what triggered the decision to migrate to Australia?
Yeah, so the war was finished in 45, in May 45. That didn't happen instantly. But maybe the seeds of that, maybe because of the Canadians, first the Germans, then the Canadians, so you met and seen other people, and here stories, and some of us Canadians would say, oh, if ever you want to come to Canada, you're welcome to come to us. So that sort of throws the seeds of adventure. Not everybody did that, but that was part of me taking that in, and then you're working in the bakery, 45, 46. By 47, what happened then? Okay, then Dad arranged for me to learn a bit more about the bakery from somebody else, because everything I knew was picked up as you go. So he found a guy in a place called Ede, 30 odd kilometers south toward Arnhem, and he had a mixed business, bread, but as well as gebak, you know, so the more the fancy part of biscuits and cake and things that we weren't doing. So I worked there for 1 year and traveled then every morning by bus from Edinburgh to Ede and came home at night. So I did that for a year, but then by that time the army conscription, or the rule that you have to serve your country in the army, was established again, and Gerrit was the first one who had to go into the army. So you had a choice of army, navy and air force. He finished up in the navy. Then that meant he was also working already in the bakery, doing deliveries and part of the job. So then suddenly Dad missed a worker. So we had then the chance to get one of those guys from an institution, but those guys were, some of them were in fairly good mental condition, that they could associate with people and follow orders or whatever.
Yeah.
They were not really retarded, maybe a bit. And so we had one of them. But then this migration bit that people wanted to go, with that Canada, Australia came in 48, 49. So that was talked about in general conversation with people. And every so often you would hear a person, oh, have you heard that? Somebody's going to Canada next week. We would even go and see them out, wave them out. That happened more and more. So that talk about going overseas, leaving Holland for whatever reasons, an adventure, or just trying to better yourself. I don't know what the reason was for people, but farmers, for instance, didn't have room to put their sons on another farm. In Canada, or whatever, the promise was made that if you work here and you sort of start to speak the language, there's plenty of opportunity to buy or to get or lease or work for shares in a farm. In Holland that just wasn't really possible, because it was all, you know, restricted to whoever owned the farms and the families owned that. Anyway, that migration became more and more popular, and thousands of people left boatloads full to Canada first.
Yeah.
But then by 48, it was said in the papers that migration to Australia is also possible. If you want to, apply for that, and then you get an interview. So again, 48 that was known. By 49, we must have rehashed that a few times. Then eventually I decided, and with talking with Dad, what do you think? Because I also knew he would lose me as a hand in the bakery, and how would he carry on? So that concerned me. But he said, no, don't let that bother you. Do whatever comes out of this and then go. And I might even come myself, so as a little side effect. Not basing that on any facts or whatever, but maybe in his heart, a desire maybe to like get out of the rot, sorry.
Yes.
I don't know, he didn't say that, but that was because he had been into that bakery as a young married man, married into his father's place, got involved with Aunt Saint because he was part of that family, and produced all those kids. And so by the time that we leave, in 44, 45, yeah, then all the kids have arrived. And
Hank born in 45.
born in 45. So then there was a house full with people, and that never bothered me. It was a nice sort of, you're teaming up with your own brothers and sisters,
Yep.
be it then Jan's, Lady, Corrie, and because I was always home, I dealt with them on a very easy, brothers and sisters.
Mm.
There was no friction. We might have had little tips, okay, you give each other one. Some of the dad would come in and said, hand het huishouden. Yeah, you get that?
Yeah.
Hold your hand to yourself. If there's anything to be hit, then I'll do it myself. Something like that. Because as you get 14, 15, 16, you want to also start playing the father role a bit with your younger brothers and sisters. And I would have done that. But yeah, Andries didn't have that sort of thing because he went fairly early already, say 16, 17, to a school in the Merchant Navy, which was not in Ermelo. He had to go there to Del Sail and qualify for that course, which was 2 or 3 years. So he was supported by that. He was living with people and had to be paid board and lodging.
Mm-hmm.
The school might have been fairly easy. I'm not sure what cost was involved, but that would have been paid by Dad. And the end of that is then that Anders qualified to go overseas, and so he was out of the house. He came back at times for a week or 2, or a month, but he was out of the way.
Yeah.
But already knew Thea then. Thea, not having brothers and sisters herself, was always with us. So instead of having less people, we always had more people, so Thea was one of them. That all her spare time after work was spending with us, weekends, and mainly the girls, of course. In 1948 they got married. Yeah, I think 48. And by the time that I then decided to migrate, was around the same time that Thea having her first baby,
Yeah.
was allowed to go and join Andries overseas, because that too was restrictions in the staff of airlines before you can bring your wife or your girlfriend or whatever out.
So he's already with KLM.
It wasn't readily. Yeah, he was with KLM then. He had been sailing for 45, 46, 47 on some what was it?
Merchant ship or something.
The KPM, that's the Royal Royal Mail, you could call it. It was a company who had their main activities in Indonesia. So, having come out of the war, the Indonesian bit was all muddled up, so being occupied by Japan. The Japanese had been there. Then when Indonesia became free, being the ex.
We're talking about Oma Andries in the Merchant Navy, or in the Navy, and he went to Indonesia. I noticed in your writings for the 50th anniversary that he had been to Australia, and he had shown you some photos, and that was one of the things.
In that idle time here in Sydney, he had seen a lot of Australia, a lot, in the round, and so he went to the Blue Mountains, for instance. He made some photos of different things happening in Sydney, and one thing I remember is the Gallipoli marching of the troops, on Anzac Day. Not Gallipoli, but it's commemorating that.
Okay.
So Anzac Day, he must have been there in April, and so I've seen photos then in 46 when he came back of, you see all those troops, what we see regularly on TV and in the papers. He brought that home in Ermelo, mind you. No, nothing about Australia, yet you see something about the Anzac Day. So there was a recollection by the time that I decided to go here. I used that as a knowing Australia. And then eventually the boats were going, we had a book that went through an organization from Holland called there's a name, doesn't really matter. They were the agent for the government to put your name down, to classify you, were you entitled to go and migrate. You were then given some money eventually, and allotted a ship and a leaving date. And that something would take months. I decided then around September to, with Dad's permission, to go and inquire. And they told me then, if you want to go soon, you can leave on the 16th of December. So from September to December, we had to activate that whole.
What year was that again, sorry?
In 49.
49.
So then by the December, so all the paperwork, so what I had to have money, which I didn't have, so we borrowed it of a farmer in Tonsel, with just out of Ermelo. It was black money apparently that Dad knew that that man had. So when he needed money, I don't know if he used that man before, but when I needed 1,000 guilders to pay for my fare from Amsterdam to Sydney, we borrowed it of that farmer in Tonsel. But we borrowed 500 more, because I had nothing much to wear. Enough, but not to go overseas, so I had to have a new suit, according to Mom and Dad. Whatever other clothing. And that was all put into a big crate, what we call a hut coffer. And so that my belongings all went into that thing, and then sent to the agents in, it was Rotterdam, not Amsterdam. Rotterdam, where my ship left. So at a certain date, the luggage has to be there. You yourself come on the day of departure. So then Rosa's father was the only one at that time who had a car. We didn't even have a car ourselves. So how do you get to Rotterdam? You can go by train. But Ome Jopi, Rosa's dad, had the car and offered them, I'll bring Jaapie to Rotterdam. So Mom and Dad came along, myself and Ome Jopi. That's all the room that was in that car and my big suitcase. So that's how I finished up in Rotterdam. So then eventually you embark and on that ship and I'll let her, bye, see you later.
So did they think at that time you were gone for good? That you were leaving for good?
Yeah.
That was...
I migrated to Australia at that moment.
So they were saying goodbye to you forever, basically? Did they think that?
Lots of people now thought that myself too, when would you, not that I thought a lot of it, but that was one of the consequences when you leave. You might never see each other. You're a bit pessimistic. That was the tendency that people thought, oh, go to Canada, overseas, you might never see it, financially not possible. But things turned around and the contact between the different areas of the world became much easier.
Yeah.
But Australia was one of the harder places to get because of the distance.
Yeah.
It cost more, took longer, but eventually I went to Australia because Canada knocked me back.
Oh, you were not back because?
I did try, even with Dad, the two of us went to that organization in Den Haag, which was a government institution, and they select you then, or they interview you first, and they decided there and then, no, you are bakers, so they asking what qualification do you have, and the country you're going to set a certain standard what they were looking for. So bakers was not one of the categories that they were really after. Anybody can be a baker, but you can't be a bricklayer so quickly or a carpenter, you need some training. I think that's how that came together. So Canada was off. We were very disappointed because we thought, oh, if we go to Canada, the same as all the other people. Now I don't know what sort of, it must have been a blessing in disguise that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because we would have been in that cold climate of Canada, which is probably lovely in summer, but not so nice in the winter. Okay, we never knew the difference. So then you let that rest, and then eventually this Australia migration comes up. Then we try again. Okay, then I went by myself, and then eventually Dad made the sort of opening. If it's any good, you go first and we'll just pestle on here, and that's what happened. Not that I then begged them, please come over. I didn't really want to do it, but in my heart, maybe I would love that, but I didn't purposely done that. But he, being so dejected from all that pestle there, mind you, that was from 23 when he got married to 52 when they left. What did he have? He had a house full of kids.
Yeah.
He had not a cent to his name. If anything, he had debts,
Yes.
paying off what was left to him by the estate. So he got the bakery all right, but that obliged him to pay his sister and his brother out.
Okay, so it was a family bakery.
So it was the family bakery of my opa,
Yeah.
who had passed away already in 36, and Dad had the bakery, but there was no money. Well, there was money coming in regularly to keep the family going, but there was never reserves or I got a few thousand salted away. So then the estate went to a solicitor, and the place was valued. Dad couldn't say, here's a section of the bakery and split it and say that couldn't be done. So I remember the figure was 6,000 guilders value. If you look back of it, it was nothing. That meant that Ome Breur was getting 2, and Tante Janne 2, and my father 2. But he had the business, of course.
Yeah.
So he had to borrow that 4,000 guilders from somebody that, again, he knew where to get money, but that had to be paid back. So that 4,000 guilders in 31, 32 was borrowed from a lady in Necker. Out of that comes then the commitment of paying the interest every year. She was quite pleased. That was her whole thing. This woman had money, and she was living off her money. So instead of in the bank, she let it out to different people for 4 or 5 or 6% interest. This was the going concern. I think it was 4% at that time. So by borrowing these 4,000 guilders, quickly putting that to 4%, was 160 guilders every year in interest. Around Christmas time, just before that, was the best time Dad had said that he could pay that 160 guilders. We went then to Nijkerk, and we, if I say we, towards that time I was already included, and he would ask me to come along. And we together went to this lady op de Markt in Nijkerk, in a nice home, which we thought, but it was a well-established home. And the lady was sitting on the table, and she called Dad Jantje. Dat was Jaap Van Bentum, but she called her Jantje. She must have known the family well. Okay, thank you very much for the 160 guilders, and he got a cup of tea, a coffee, whatever we got, and we went back again, and that repeated itself every year. Never paid off the sum. But the borrowed sum was never paid off.
It became an interest-only loan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The lady was quite happy because that gave her a regular income. She probably had lots more money,
Yeah.
and that gave her an existence without touching the capital. Because by the time that Dad did pay her back when he migrated, and again he borrowed that money from the church and the sale of the business, then he went back to that lady, and the lady was sort of disappointed to lose a customer. She said, what am I going to do with this money now? So he had to find another borrower. Anyway, that was her business. But she made that opening, Jantje, wat doe je me nou aan? Anyway, that's a little aside. So then Dad, migrating, he sold the business. And I believe that he got about 23,000 guilders roundabout for the business.
Okay.
Then settling all his debts, which was that lady, 4,000 there. I think he was still owing money on the ingredients that he used in the bakery. They were all on sort of a monthly account. and if he didn't have it, then he paid
Yeah.
next month, and would always be pushing off. So whatever he owed at that time, but mind you, I was already here, so I didn't hear or see anything of the detail. He would have paid all his debt and the fares for the 10 kids and his wife and himself, so 12 fares had to be paid. Then towards the end he was short, he didn't have enough money to migrate. The government wouldn't help him, because there was lots of assistance given to migrants, but because Dad was sort of his own boss, had never worked for a boss, so he was not on a list of workers, unions was not involved. And we went to Den Haag again together to ask for assistance. They said, no, Mr. Van Bentum, you've been able to look after yourself all this time. You better do that from now on as well. You don't qualify for any assistance. While he had sacrificed everything he had, he wasn't allowed to get any of it. So he borrowed that money again from that farmer that I said then in the back,
Yeah.
who had the 4,000 guilders.
So he was short 4,000 guilders.
Around about 4,000, and I think it was even a bit more which he borrowed from the deacons of the Reformed Church in Ermelo, with the understanding that that would be paid first, and that man hadn't set any limits as long as he would get an interest. So that's how Dad came here. So I didn't know any of his debts. I knew about the 4,000, but I thought if he sells the business and whatever, I never really put that together. He would bring some money, at least a bit of money to start off.
Yeah.
No, he had nothing. If anything, he had debts left behind. So then, coming here with nothing, the Australian government gave a certain amount of money for settling, and I'll say it was $100 per person, because he had quite a family. He was getting a sum of money given to him as an incoming migrant to help you settle down. And I know some of that money was used to buy a fridge, because he needed a fridge straight away. So that was a little beginning help to settle down. What next?
How did he pay off the debt?
The death was then talked about, of course, in the family, and it was agreed. And when I came on the scene again, because I was here, yeah, let's then all contribute some of that money from our weekly income, and I think we said something like, it was all pounds at that time, say £1 a week. So whatever you were earning, £1 a week, we put it aside to pay off the debt of Mum and Dad. So that was your father, Gerrit. He was there, but he never participated because he went back, not instantly, but because of going back down the track,
He wanted to
which
keep.
was about 8 or 9 months later. He needed all the money to save up for the trip to go back, so he could not go. So I won't say he refused, but he couldn't, because whatever money he earned, he needed that for himself and save up to go back to Gerrit. So Janna, Leni, your father, and then I joined them as well. So between, who else was there? Antje, no, Antje was only 15 or 16, 17 maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think that Antje was involved. Anyway, whatever we had committed to put that money together. But then, because of the contacts that I had already before they came with different migrants, here comes in the brothers Oak in St. Mary's. They were on my ship, that's how I got to know the guys. And then later on, when they settled in St. Mary's, I often went to them, I even helped them on my days off while my work was in Richmond at the Hoogland College, every weekend, and I had no home to go to, I went to the Oaks. They had established themselves there quite quickly in temporary accommodation, and they even built a little bedroom for Jaapie. So the weekends of my time off that I spent with them, I had a place to sleep. So with the Oaks came the knowledge that they knew about me and the family coming in '52 and having debts in Holland. Then they arranged again, because this Oak had a lot of what they called at that time black money in Holland left behind, which was not allowed to bring here because of exchange restrictions. Migrants could not, even if they were millionaires, they couldn't bring that million with them, and they'll be left behind. So Oak had more money than he was allowed to bring. So he says to me, and then to Mum and Dad, still being in Holland at that time, let them go to my mother, who has that whatever money was left over under the bed. And so they went to Winterswijk, where they came from, and borrowed that money to pay back that farmer in Ermelo and in Tonsel. And so this was within 12 months after their leaving, and that man was most surprised because there was no time limits given. Well, that must be a good country there that they already be able to pay it back. Anyway, that was a little aside, but that's how that happened. So then we paid back the Oaks here. So in that respect, Peter's Oak was getting his money paid to him in dollars and cents, so it was pounds then, instead of having it there with his mother in Winterswijk.
Exactly.
And he did that with quite a few people, apparently in St. Mary's. So the different migrants which contacted one another, oh, go to Peter's Oak, he might be able to help you, and so through them he got quite a bit of his capital here.
So we should really go back to where you got on the ship in Holland, in Rotterdam.
In Rotterdam.
When
Yeah, so then the boat leaves.
what was the name of the ship again?
The Volendam.
The Volendam.
The Volendam belonged to a company that was called the Holland America Line, but those ships were chartered by the government to do all sorts of work, so nothing to do with America. It was used to bring migrants to Australia. It was left from Rotterdam by way of the Mediterranean Suez Canal, and then eventually, because of the slowness of the boat, and because it was an old boat, it needed to take in provisions for the people as well as for the machinery, whatever it was, oil or coal, I'm not sure, but it must have been oil. So we had to go to Aden and Colombo, and then eventually Colombo, the long stretch to Fremantle. So that whole thing took 42 days. So it was, that's 6 weeks. We left on the 16th of December, and the Christmas time, for instance, was spent on board, and I think we were around about that time in Egypt, Suez Canal. And we got to Fremantle about the 21st, 22nd of January, which was by then is 1950. Then, because I had nominated to go to Sydney, I stayed on board. Lots of people left already in the West who had nominated Fremantle or Perth, but I didn't. Then we got to Melbourne, so my ship didn't go any further than Melbourne. It did, but not all people had to get off. And because I nominated to go to Sydney, I had to then go by train with whoever else nominated Sydney as destination on the train to Sydney. Now, by that time I had met the Oaks on board, not greatly, but I knew of them. They all had nominated Sydney, and so did Mr. Van Dam, the father of Gerrit Van Dam. not that he was a great friend, but he was known to my people. And so Dad had said to him, keep an eye on Jaap, he's on the same ship, and so whatever that meant, he didn't have to keep an eye on me. He was a baker by trade as well, and he worked in the kitchen the whole trip. I've never seen the man, fleetingly. But he was always either sleeping because he had to work at night, or very early before we people came along. So Kees van Dam earned his, not that he earned money, but he got plenty to eat, and in the kitchen he had something to do, I suppose. And that's how he got to Australia. Then by the time we got to Melbourne, I had to front up to him again, and we had to physically then travel together from Melbourne to Sydney by train. So did he own. Then in Sydney, I had an address to go to someone in Sydney, which was in Bexley. That was given to me by people in Holland. A guy who had been to Australia, Henk Brouwer, met this Kees van Dam. And so through Henk Brouwer, we were sort of given an opening, come to Bexley, and then we sort of can help you to find work, accommodation, whatever. So that did happen. We were befriended by Henk Brouwer in-laws, and Henk had organized that the neighbors of this in-law family was an elderly man all by himself in a house in Bexley, and he wouldn't mind having two people there sleep there, but not board or lodging, just for sleeping. We would then do our own cooking or whatever, but for the first week we were welcome to come to the people next door, and that he was a shoemaker, Mr. Paard. And so Henk Brouwer was married to his daughter. So that's how that. So living with this Mr. Cox in his house, Kees van Dam quickly found a job again as a baker in, I think it was in Earlwood, not far from Bexley. And I, with the help of those Paard family, they found a job for me at a pastry shop, bakery, where I said that I could bake bread and biscuits and whatever else. So they put the two and two together, got them a pastry. I didn't speak a word of English, so they found a job for me, also in Earlwood, lent me a bike, so from Bexley to Earlwood, and I wouldn't even remember now how, but it was very up and down hilly, over a railway line, and then go to Earlwood at 4 o'clock in the morning, because those bakers start early. So this young son of the Paard family had found that job for me and lent me his bike. So over here I'm going on the bike that early in the morning, not really knowing my way, but I found it all. Then trying to do the work in this bakery, not understanding what they were telling me, not really knowing a lot of, say, recipes, and if I would have known, they were Dutch recipes, I had to make their recipe. Now it became a big disaster for me and for them too, I think. That by Thursday I decided I'm not going back tomorrow. I was so dejected and so downhearted and so whatever. I hadn't been paid yet, and that I didn't care. All I had was £25 of lending money, that's what they called it, that mothers were given when you were out. And so I said to the Paard family, I'm not going back anymore. And they might have asked me why, I don't know what I said. But Ken, the son, went to this bakery and they were good enough to give me whatever I was entitled of. So he came back with my first earned money, but being out of work as well. The Oaks had found a job in the Concord Rebed Hospital. which was already there then as the main hospital for all their returned soldiers. We didn't know that, but there was a place, there was plenty of work that was set. So the Oaks had found themselves a job in that hospital, which meant he became an orderly or a cleaner. You know, unskilled work,
Yeah.
and there was barracks across the road near the river where you could sleep and eat and drink. There was a big canteen, and that's where you ate your 3 meals a day, and there was a laundry involved, and so that's where the two homes had settled. And I thought, now that could be something for me at least, and I earn money, I have my keep, you know, all those things were in the one job. Now we did that for, this was all, we arrived at the end of January, early February till about Easter time. Now, I've forgotten now when it was Easter, it was early or late Easter, let's say till the end of April. We worked at the Repair Hospital. Then the Oaks, being the enterprising people they weren't here to work in the hospital. They wanted to have a property and started farming this. So we traveled around, and I was already then buying the Sydney Morning Herald. Not so much buying them, I found them every day in the locker rooms of all the staff who were coming in and out. I left all those papers behind. So I'm trying to read the paper there. And I had already found out different things, so when the Oaks talked about that, I said, yeah, I know where that is. They had talked about a farm in Richmond, that happened to be the Hawksley College. They had seen in the Herald, so in whatever paper it would have been the Herald, stations, farms and stock was the segment of properties for sale. And I would look them up and I would find different properties in the Richmond area. So it wasn't Richmond, it was Londonderry. So they called it the Richmond area. So we would go by train from, and we were still in Sydney, in Repet, later on in a little cheap hotel called, what was it now, in the Pitt Street. Now we'll get back to me. So that's where we stayed for 3 weeks before we had the next job.
Crystal?
Hanging around in Sydney, cozy chambers, CB chambers. It was called the Pitt Street. It was catering mainly for the people from the country who come every year to the Royal Easter Show. And rent it out. So it was nothing flashy, but the country people came there. That's where we had a room for a number of weeks. But we had to eat too, so we ate in a little milk bar run by Greeks, which was quite common in that time. And what do we eat? Ham and eggs. It was lovely. But what do you eat the next day and the day after? They didn't have a big menu either. No, I think for weeks and weeks we had ham and eggs every morning. So that was those two brothers and myself, but then quite quickly, but that couldn't last, of course, money had to come in. So then the idea was picked up, and we had heard about that farm in Richmond, which happened to be the Hawksley College. So then we take the train from Sydney to Blacktown. Blacktown had to wait for the Richmond line, and at that time they were not very fitting in time-wise, so you often had to wait for hours before the Richmond line train went. It went to Richmond, then you come to a dead end. It wasn't going any further. So where's this big farm? Happened to be the Hawksley College, and they didn't give you the detail. Yeah, that's 2 kilometers up Londonderry Road. You know, thousands of acres, all government land, but then they put an agricultural college there, called Hawksley. Now we walked there, and yeah, they had plenty of jobs, but not on the farm. They were in the dining room, looking after the students.
Okay.
That detail wasn't given, but okay, we needed a job. We weren't really farmers. So we were given a bedroom, or a room yourself, in the quarters for the staff, and you walk across to the dining room, and there was the kitchen and all the supplies, and that's three times a day. You will set up tables and wait on those students to come for breakfast, tea and lunch, or the other way around. Okay, we did that this was in May, in Easter time, so from May on, for a couple of months, and then Jan Oom was getting fed up with that, and his idea was to settle down, and the family was coming from Holland. We were not there yet, the guys had gone out first. So that was sort of a deadline that they had to meet. We have to have accommodation for the family when they come. Okay, Jan Oom went out on his own bed and he found then the acreage in St. Mary's there on Desborough Road. And Bettis had bought acreage in Londonderry because of very high rainfall at that time. The Londonderry properties were underwater. Not massive, but enough for he could not do anything. You know, couldn't build. So by the time the two families came, Jan Oom had bought this St. Mary's property and had been able to put some temporary dwellings, one for him, and Bettis was involved in that. And weekends, I went there too, but I stayed at the Hawkesbury College for my income, my accommodation, whatever, but they had gone back then and batched into a little shed there on that 5-acre property. Built the accommodation. The accommodation was very plain, with just besser blocks, which were already available there. They cut a lot of timber, the tea tree type of small stuff, cut a whole lot out of the bush on that 5 acres, but a couple of 100 meters away from the road too, so there a bit of privacy. Didn't ask the council to build, just didn't. Made a sort of a track through the bushes and cut out a square area, put the besser blocks on the ground. Mine was all mud because of all that rain. And then bought some timber in Penrith, from the timber yard. That was delivered. Put timber on the floor. Paved this then, what do you call that? Anyway, all the slot work, you know, the timber as you put it together, so they had a floor.
Yeah.
Then we put the side walls up on top of that floor, and we had some corrugated iron was bought, and so the roof was up, and louver windows were put in. No lining, no double, say, plaster or whatever. It was all. Now he said that's handy. You just put a nail in the brick, in the timber, and you can hang up your mirror or your pictures or whatever. And that's how the two wives with the kids came eventually. And it was quite cozy and quite homely, really. They brought a lot of stuff, so also the rode zaddoek and all sorts of colourful stuff was hanging on the wall. They had lots of hut coffers, you know, those big things, full of textiles, which I didn't know, but they were all full. And they were standing everywhere. All stuff that for investment, they put it in goods and brought it all in. Anyway, that was all there. And we slept on the floor. There was no mattresses, mattresses, but no frames to hang it in. And later on, he built them out of timber and made some makeshift beds. So that's how we started there. He himself with his kids, and so did Jan. So Jan lived on the front. Betty said, I want to live in the back, out of sight, and I can do what I like. Now, it took a couple of years before Penrith Council woke up. So they weren't too particular either, otherwise nobody docked them in apparently. But there was no sewer, there was no water, there was nothing on that property except water on Desborough Road. They were clever enough to connect up that main water and laid some water pipes to connect up to those different temporary dwellings. The first of two, just over the ground. But the ground was so hard, even with the rain, it was very hard to get into ground at that time, and still is really.
So you met Nom Hoyer at the college?
Yeah, so we're talking to those guys, he was one of them, and then he sort of said, if you want to work on the farm, then I can ask my dad. Eventually he came back and he said, yeah.
Okay.
So we waited till the Christmas holiday when he travelled, and I travelled with him.
Good. What did you do
The
on
bus.
What did you do on the farm?
That was just there, milking twice a day and doing some farm work, paddock work, whatever. The only job really we did was, have you heard of tussocks? Tussocks is a sort of a wild grass,
Yeah.
which is very hard to eradicate, and that had gone to Hoyle. It came from Bulgaria, which is further up near, toward Milton. And it seeded and it spread over the south coast and invaded all the good grass. And it restricted then the production of grass and cows having something to eat, because they couldn't eat, wouldn't eat the tussocks. So we had to go with a mattock, sort of climb under it and lift them out one by one. Now, there was millions of them. So we did that in between. Yeah, and then we took the billy and we had lunch in the paddock. Didn't go home because it was 2 kilometers. So did I tell you then that after milking we went back to town, had breakfast in the house with his wife,
Yeah.
which was Myrtle. And so Myrtle was all set up for us to come in. Before that we delivered the milk to the factory. On the one side you bring the milk of the previous night and the morning, so only once a day you deliver, and then that goes to the other side, and that's where the previous day's production of it's a cheese factory, mind you, all the whey was collected in a big vat, and each farmer, according to what they brought in, a percentage of that you will get back in whey. So we turned around, and on the other side we filled up a number of cans, and that went then on the back of the truck, yeah. And then we went to Myrtle to have breakfast, and about 9:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30, he went to the paper shop, bought the Sydney Morning Herald. And that's basically where that started. And for him to have something to read in between with lunch or whenever he wanted to read a bit. So then we brought that whey stuff to the pigs, fed them. That was another job. That wasn't all that long. Then you clean up the cans again in sort of a wash section of the dairy. The dairy was always clean straight after milking was finished, so that wasn't dirty. Yeah, basically then with the fed with that whey, you fed the poddy calves, you know, the small ones, and then with the bull calves or heifer calves, he would select a few, kept them for further breeding, and the rest went to the market. And were picked up again by a carrier, like on the Coleman here.
Yeah.
And he would pick up the balance, and that would go to Bega.
Yeah.
Bega was the center where the markets were. Yeah, so that was sort of a daily thing, and that repeated itself till the time that I left.
So were you there from 50 to 51?
From around May, no, from Christmas 50, yeah,
Yeah.
that was at the end of the year, till the following, around about September. And I remember the time that I wanted to go back to Sydney because of Mum and Dad coming.
Yeah.
I had said to Hoyer, I'll have to leave, so I booked a seat on the bus again, to come from Eden, Bega, Nowra. There's no trains there, so everything is by bus. And it was raining cats and dogs for about a week. That all the creeks and all the rivers, everything was flooding, and there was lots of them. There was no bridges, so normally they drive through a bit of water, but it was so high and rough that the buses were stopped, so I couldn't even go on the day I wanted to go. Had to wait till that all subsided, 2, 3, 4 days,
Yeah.
and then eventually I did go. And the water had gone down, but you could still see. You've been to the south coast, there's different places, but
Yeah.
they streamlined that whole highway, but at that time it was very winding, around hills and mountains and whatever. Yeah, it was a 3-4 hour trip on the bus. So that is then September 51.
51, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So then I went back to the college, not intending to, but I looked around for some work. No, I didn't find anything that I was interested in, so I thought, I need an income. I went to the college actually to say hello to the guys there, and then they said, well, come back for a job. No, not really, but 2 days later I went back and said, can you still have me? Yeah, always wanted people there. So then I was there again till Mum and Dad came, and I stayed on till I sort of wanted to earn more money, but not being qualified and not wanting to go back to a bakery.
Yeah.
Was sort of restricted. I don't know, I was indecisive of what will I do. But then your father had come out and was there, and they joined in the Goodyear work, made a lot more money. So eventually I made the big decision that I'm leaving whatever I was doing and we'll go to Goodyear.
Okay.
So then I'm doing shift work for a number of years, but your father was in the mill where all the raw rubber comes in and is then grounded and whatever processed. And I became a tyre builder, because by the time I looked for work, there was plenty of work, but they allotted me in the tyre section. So I was building the produced rubber sections and make a tyre out of it. So I did that for a number of years really.
Okay.
Till such time that I had saved up a bit of money, and then you think, I want to do something for myself. So I started the shop, saved up the money, bought a sandwich shop in Sydney, in Reservoir Road, Reservoir Street,
In Sydney?
off Elizabeth.
Okay.
Yeah, just looking in the Herald again, other business for sale. And I've always done that, we're sitting there in the dining room or the eating room, lunch room from Goodyear, talking about with other Dutch people. And they were all looking for something after shift work at the factory, because most of us didn't want to do the forever and ever. We want to do something different. Anyway, I thought I found my job. So I bought that store, and even if the work wasn't too bad, financially it was a big flop.
Okay.
So I bought it for far too much money, but what did I know? They were too easy going. So I paid the price whatever it was advertised for. And that's the good right of that woman who owned it, to sell it for a price, and if she can get it, and somebody's stupid enough to pay it, and it was in her pocket. I didn't think of it, and the profit, say, I think it was £4,000, and the profit was, well, what would it have been? 140, 150 pounds a week, something out of the turnover of the sandwiches and drinks and whatever. Why? You come in, I'll work with you for a week to train you, and then you work for me for a week. So they had a fortnight, but the second week was then, so to speak, for me. She said, then if you then do all the work, which was reasonable, I'll look after the till. So that second week, she was in charge of the till still. So there was no checking then, and I never even thought of it that there was dishonest people. She made sure, so if there wasn't a turnover of the customers, she would feed out of the pocket some money in there. And by the end of the day, there was the turnover what she had advertised it for.
Oh, really?
So the next week, when I was then fully on my own, as he was gone, there was nowhere near it. And it never picked up a bit. But it was a restricted area with a few factories around, and so you couldn't really build it up. And then Gerrit and Roos were here, were in Australia, and Gerrit had said, oh, there was 2 rooms in that shop. One was the shop and the other was a storeroom. He said, if we build it up a bit and paint it and put a bit of furniture in, maybe you can start a coffee shop. So we did that, but now a few bits of coffee and milkshakes, whatever. It really didn't, and you need extra staff. So I did have a girl who came with the shop, and then Margaret came with me from Blacktown, and we travelled together every morning. But there was another drawback. I could have lived up top
Yeah.
in the bedroom, it was bad over, but I didn't want to. I went home every day because I still had to milk the cow. So every day in the peak hour traffic from Blacktown to Reservoir Road, so you know Parramatta Road.
I used to drive.
It was already the same then and it's still the same.
You used to drive to Sydney.
We had a car and that was the car then. So what year was that then? After good year, I was there 56, 57, I'm not really sure. And
All right.
we did that for 2 years anyway. It was in the time that Reverend Baumer was still around. And Baumer sort of gave a little hint at a given time when he visited us in Blacktown. I'll put it on the market and accept your losses or whatever. And
Yeah.
because I became irritable and unhappy and whatever, but I was stuck. Anyway, I sold it.
Okay.
And actually got the price back, the total price, but because of my expenses being so high while paying the wages and paying off, because it was a finance company, I had I had a deposit, but the rest was borrowed from city brokers, that was a finance company. And again, you don't know what the interest is, but I would have paid through the nose for that borrowed money. Anyway, by the time I got my money back and paid off the city brokers, there was just enough left to buy bread round. So then I started having a bread round. That was at St. Mary's. Buttercup had a bread factory, and then a particular bloke I was introduced to by, I think it was Gus Jensen. He had heard of somebody had a bread round for sale. So I went to talk to the guy, and the money that left over from the sale of the shop was just about enough to buy that bread run, because that's the goodwill you pay for the bread run. The car I had, I turned it over into a utility, it was a panel van, and so I was in business. Bread run was not too bad either, but yeah, okay.
Is it you stopped?
No, Ben said, because you want to,
No,
I'll keep going
yeah,
on.
no, that's fine. What I want to do is now bring you back to, did you go down to Melbourne when the family arrived on the boat?
Yeah, it was November.
Yeah. You went to Melbourne?
52.
You picked them up?
Yeah.
And how was that? How was their reaction to coming into Australia?
I flew there with NSAT
Okay.
and went to a family which were connected to the Hoyers, and they had provided me with an address which happened to be in Hawthorne. So I flew there, and this person picked me up from the airport, stayed there overnight, to the next morning to go to the harbour on the Yarra, whatever, and to meet the boat.
Okay.
And so then eventually the boat had come in. I think we were waiting, we seen it coming in. And then his name was Colin, he had suggested that he wanted to bring the whole family to his place and have lunch there. Colin and Rola. So he had a little prefect, a little small car.
Yeah.
And he ferried all the girls and a number of older ones. We went by tram from the harbour to Hawthorne. Anyway, he worked it all out, and that was fine. So between arriving in the morning and me joining Mum and Dad, we went to Hawthorne for lunch, and then later on the whole caboodle was transported back again to Spencer Street Station, where they had already booked that. It was down in Holland, so the
Okay.
travel agency from Lisson or Lindeman. that's the agent that you travel through, is still existing. And so then we went to Spencer Station, got on the train, the whole family, by way of Albury, not train. And the next morning at 9, 10 o'clock we arrived in. So it was a repeat of what I've done with Kees van Dam a couple of years before.
So you knew the way.
So then here we are in Central, and a whole lot of us had to go, which was great. The Oaks had said, you can bring them all to here, and we'll accommodate them till you find. And I've already bought that house on Douglas Road, but it was empty. Their crates were on the ship, so you have to wait for the transport. And because of arriving in Melbourne, it had to come by road transport to Blacktown. Now that took 6 weeks before they got it. It was just a week before Christmas that the crates came. The company, Stevedore and Company from Stevens. And here we were contacted, of course, one day, so we were there to receive the goods. So the truck just came into the driveway of that old house next to the verandas, and we unloaded it straight out of the trucks on the veranda and into the different room. The family was there to help. So in no time the house was installed. It was empty, clean, but basically not a very pleasing home, I would say, if you think back now. But at that time, that's how it was. And that's the start of settling down. So Christmas time, we were settled. So the first Christmas service was arranged in I'm talking about church service, was in St. Mary's by the Onks. Jan Onk was a lay preacher of the Hervormde Kerk in Holland. So he had some sort of experience in presenting himself. So he had arranged and he was in charge. So, and then all the kids of the family, so they had a whole day, their activities, and that was the introduction for my family. So some of it better songs, some of it Ben Konings, with peepers, they were all found out to have a place to sleep, but during the day they would eat at the Oaks. So if you think back of it, there's people that just took in 12 markets or, and became friends. But I take it that Mum and Dad would have paid for the expenses there. I was still in college, so I would arrange all this for them, but I had to go back to the college and do about 5 days or 7 days, whatever shift you had.
What was their reaction to landing in Australia? What did they tell you?
Dad was always sort of very optimistic. I think he loved it, and we didn't really talk so much, but soon enough it came out that Mum or Oma was very homesick already. And that wasn't really spelled out that I have homesick, you don't know that, but she was unhappy. And so eventually when they settled down and the boys found work, which was at Penfolds Wines in Minchiebury. Then Dad got a job there too as a cleaner. So the man had push bikes and a cycle from Douglas Road, Dulcet Road, Western Highway. That was a job. That was before we had the car. And the girls then had the jobs in Limawa, and the rest had to go to school. So it was, I think Lida went to school for the Blue Moon, a few months, and Margaret and Nina. First in Penrith, pretty soon St. Mary's had a high school, so they were transferred then from Penrith to St. Mary's. And by the time that Hank was from high school, then when Blacktown had a high school. Because in '52 there were no schools, a public school in the post office then in Glasgow Road.
The central, central school.
Hank went there for a little while, but then the new schools were built, when they still are now, near Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, Blacktown Boys.
Yeah. So I think Henk finished up, but somehow I haven't seen much of them because I wasn't living at home. I was either working or whatever. But Henk's school years, I'm not really know what he was involved in. I know it happened, but
So was Alma left on her own a lot, was
so
she?
when everybody went to school, she was on her own. Again, I didn't see the physical side of that. Later on, I hear then that she would keep one of the girls home, just for company, maybe in turn, not to make it too obvious for the schools. And the girls had to walk all the way from Douglas Road again to go to Penrith School in St Mary's to Doonside Station. So there was quite a distance. I think it was about 2 kilometers. So they walked through the paddocks, which at that time was still open paddock before it became Huntington Heights. Anyway, there was open paddock, and so they had a whole track over the hill. And yeah, you can picture roughly where the Seventh-day Adventist Church is.
Yeah, yeah.
And then eventually you go to Doonside Station to go to
Yeah.
train, go to school. Yeah, so Mum would have kept one home, but I was in college, so I didn't see that. But later on I hear that just for company, that she's someone to talk to. The Kellys across the road were very involved with them.
Yeah.
Pretty soon when we came in, the first milk that was used was brought by the Kellys. And Mrs. Kelly soon noticed that Mum was homesick or not happy. And she had said, oh, that's no problem. You put 5 cents in the jar and you start saving up for a trip and you go back as soon as you have enough money. And that was done. Anyway, that never amounted to many pounds or dollars or whatever. But you know, eventually, through Andries being the KLM, originally, in the beginning, we weren't aware of that. You know, the cheaper flying. But by the time that it was necessary, that we put some money together again, and Mum and Dad went to Holland in '56. So it was 4 years then after they came.
That's quite quick, really.
Yeah. So it was basically, yeah, to give them, because they were longing, we were always talking about Holland, of course. So we must have thought about how can we solve this, let them go back to Holland. Because there was still the other 4, Andries, Thea, Janse, Jan, Corrie, and Henk.
Yeah. And Gerrit.
And Gerrit and Gerry. So they went to Holland, but then the problem is, where are they going to stay? So they were found out to a little while here, a little while there. And after 6 months, I think they really got fed up with that. Dad was, because you know, you constantly go from pillar to post. And so they came back, and that we thought might cure Mum. And it did for a while. She was happy then to come back and start again. But a couple of years later, that repeated itself again. So in '59, I think, and they went a number of times. I think '56 was the first time. In that same year, Tante dies. They had to leave her behind. And then when they came back, she was with Anders in Thea. And she had cancer and eventually died, so Mum and Dad went home. The second time, yeah, again they repeated that same story again with the 4 families, but again it only lasted 3 months then. Because they generally said, oh, we'll go for 6 months, we've got plenty of time, and Dad was glad to be free, you know, and enjoy himself. And he would socialise at an animal or wherever they went. And Mum was with Gerry, and that didn't really go that well. Well, Gerry was maybe hospitable, but she had her work to do, and she was very business-like, with not much love shown. And she had kids at that time too. So there was not a good reception at Gerrit and Gerry. Well, Ermelo was the place where they wanted to be. Anyway, so they went back to Anders and Thea. They're sitting on a bovenhuis, yeah, the first floor. And that wasn't ideal, especially for Dad. And then you were strangers, okay, the neighborhood people they talked to. But,
Not home.
so then by 63, I had worked the different bread runs and things that are done. Then I had the urge I want to sell or get rid of my bread run, and I want to have a bit of a break. Or I want to go home. So 63, I went to home.
Mm-hmm.
Again, do the same what Mom and Dad did. Stayed with Anders in Thea, stayed in Ermelo, came with Gerrit and Gerrit. And okay, make the most of it. But I had then saved up a bit of money so I could buy a car there. Tante Janna was still there, divorced of her husband and living by herself. So I teamed up with her a lot. And she was then with Rosa Gerrit. And we went traveling different weeks to Germany, Switzerland, and just chaperoning, and that became difficult sometimes. We had to hire a room. We couldn't hire it as a married couple, but I did. I got that room because they didn't have separate rooms. It wasn't financially, I suppose, good for them. So I said to tell the other, you just go to bed or undress and I'll come in later. Whatever, we made it work.
She was your auntie, so.
Oh, she was easy going. But,
yeah, she was a funny character.
But I never thought of that beforehand. So that just happened.
Yeah.
So that was the consequences of going together on the trip.
Did they ever talk about what the train trip and the food, the Aussie food, that kind of stuff?
No, I can't remember that. What they ever
You said they didn't really like the meat pies or something.
They didn't like them. I can
They had
remember
no
the
choice.
reaction,
Yeah.
because they've never had them, and I could not understand because I liked them. That was not that I had them all the time, but I had pies before, and it's something if you're hungry,
Yeah.
instead of a sandwich or whatever, you have a pie. But yeah, how they then experienced that and what they've said, I can't remember any of that conversation.
Okay.
But that was in the cabins where we all together, we would have been.
Yeah.
Some people might have been in different cabins.
Were you sitting or asleep, or did you? Were you able to sleep?
Sitting.
That was,
Yeah.
How long did that trip
Would-
take?
Yeah, I would say about 10 at night you leave,
Yeah.
and then you travel all night. It might have even been earlier. So this man in Hawthorne who had brought us all to the station, I would have known, we would have known what time, but I can't remember now if it was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. But I do remember that about 10 o'clock the next morning, so all night in the train, you arrived at Sydney Central.
And how did you get from Sydney Central to the
Then
Ox?
We would have changed trains there. The interstate train comes to a dead end. I knew then that that was arranged, that we would go to St. Mary's.
Mhm.
So we all went to the suburban side of things and then by train to Mount Druitt and then walked from Mount Druitt station to the Western Highway, followed a bit over Oaks Creek, go into Bennett Road's further. This first road, whatever that is, there used to be a jam factory there. Anyway, whatever that road is, that would go to Desborough, and then we would walk up past Desborough, and that's where the Oaks had the accommodation for all of them. And we walked that, and it was nearly an hour walk.
And
It was in November, and it's hot. That I think they were all suffering from the heat.
Did they all have bags as well, carrying suitcases?
They would have had some hand luggage, but no suitcases. But how was that done then? I can't remember if there was a car involved, if somebody had a car.
Picked up all the
and
luggage.
picked it up, otherwise we would have had to carry each his own luggage.
Mm. Because it was 6 weeks before you got the big crate, so they would have had to have clothes with them.
Yeah, so whatever clothes they had on board would have come off the ship and with the train to to last them for that 4 or 5 weeks that we were at the homes before the big crates came with all the rest of their belongings.
So did they ever talk about what they thought of Australia when they arrived? Their long distances,
I can't remember if they said, oh, what a rotten place or what a nice place.
the flies came up though, didn't
And the
they?
flies were the pest.
Yeah.
And you sit on your back and we had little twigs and you would try to get them off. And it was just an ongoing battle, so that would have been one of the conversation points.
Yeah.
But it was part of it. I can't remember that there was anything said that they were downhearted or which would never come to this place.
None of them said
I
that?
I didn't hear that.
No.
No, if they thought it,
Yeah.
I'm only thinking back now. No, I heard no negative things. As the only thing that for me always stands out that Mum eventually settling down. Wasn't so bad in St Mary's because there were lots of contacts there and people to talk to and helpful to accommodate you. They weren't independent. They were staying in with everybody and eating. Maybe they ate separately.
So it was like a bit of a community.
But there was a whole community for people to talk and there was a lot of time and coffee mornings and afternoon teas. Better's own never worked for the boss, so he was always around. A number of the other people would have been shift workers, working in the area there somewhere.
So they must have got a bit of a shock when they hit Blacktown then,
Yeah.
because it's isolated. And
In a way they were looking forward to go to their own house. By that time it had been waiting for them for a long time.
yeah.
And at different times, some of them had bikes then, either borrowed or they might have even bought a few second-hand bikes. Gerrit brought a brand new bike with him from Holland.
Okay, so that came on the train as
Gerrit
well.
had, remember that in Holland they had beautiful bikes with these drum brakes that they built in. I've never seen them before, but it was all the well-to-do people had that sort of bike. We in the Van Bentum family never had bikes like that. Gerrit brought a bike from Holland and taking it back to Douglas Road. Now that is Desborough Road for the first few weeks where it arrived. Like I said before, we had a lot of rain, so all unmade roads, dirt roads, they were going very sloppy and muddy, whatever. All that mud got in these drums. And in between he couldn't even ride it anymore. So eventually he cleaned it up and he sold it to a steward in the Hawkesbury College where I was working.
Yeah.
So there was this, it was a Swiss guy, and he took a liking to the bike, and in Richmond, the college is wherever it is there, on Blacktown Road, you have the college there, which is about 2 kilometers from town. So Paul, dierenwachter, bought that bike, and all he had to do was cycle to town, paper, or get his haircut, or whatever, but Paul needed transport instead of walking all the time. He took that bike back to Switzerland, eventually.
Well,
Gerrit sold his bike.
Yeah.
So at least he got his money back, but it wasn't very functional to go on Douglas Road to Dunsart Road and then to Menchiebury.
Okay.
Then, some months later we bought a car and then they driven to work with that car, the two brothers, and later on there.
What car did you buy? What was the first car? What
was
make?
the first?
What make was the first car?
A Holden.
A Holden. Okay.
The first Holden, we said before, we saved up for some deposit. We had found out that there's a waiting list to get a car. You couldn't just go to the showroom and say, oh, I want that car, and then wait a few days for delivery. No, you had to order it. There was Adrie Lehman was involved in that.
Oh yes, we did talk about that, didn't we?
Adrie Lehman came to St. Church. We were then known about the Reformed Church, but at that time we had services in Toongabbie. And to get from Douglas Road again, we had to walk all the way to Blacktown Station, go 2 stations up to Toongabbie, and then walk to that church in the Salvation Army Hall. That was a real enterprising sort of thing, every Sunday again.
Yeah.
So pretty soon we said, yeah, we should have a car for all sorts of reasons, not only the church, but also go to work, or even go to the shops. So we arrived in November. In May, we bought the first car. How did we get a car? Raymond had said, if you want a car, he actually was involved in, on the station, to bring him to St. Mary's with an old car that he had. Because, I don't know, I thought that later on, I think, being a single guy there in Australia, he would have looked for a future mate. And he was teaming up pretty quickly with either Jana or Antje or whatever. But he socialized with our family. It was before the Fabers came. Fabers were not around yet. And that never came to anything, but he spent quite a bit of time to us. Another one was Roel de Roo, Gerry Moelman's first husband.
Yeah.
Roel de Roo had found out, and they lived in Orange. There was a little Dutch settlement in Orange Reformed Church. He was on transport with timber from Oberon to timber yards in Sydney as well. And he had found out that we had settled in Dartmouth Road, so on the way back or the way in, he would call in. Now how they found out, I don't know, but probably Soup Church, Youth Club, whatever. I would think he also was looking of opportunities to meeting girls. That never came out either, but pretty soon after that, Roel de Roo then settled for Gerry Moelman, because Gerry Piet.
Tell me about the house that you bought and the 5 acres.
Yeah, so Sue Simpson and Francis looking for property. Eventually he showed me around the different places around Blacktown, because I've asked for some land with a house. Otherwise I would have finished up in the street in Blacktown somewhere. But it happened to be. So there's nothing in between house block and acreage. And there was no 2 acres or 3 acres. It happened to be 5. Or mine was a bit more. Yeah, so we found that property. I was after a house from Mum and Dad, so that was on that property. The rest didn't really matter, but it was 5 acres. It was a leftover of 16 acres that a family, Sini, Maltese people, had that property, and they had horses on it. They were having a neckery in Eastern Creek, and they had the horses had to graze a bit during the day on the property, but that was before I bought it. But the evidence of having those horses there, they had trampled everything on the property. Before was a chicken farm, so they were all runs, chicken sheds. Some sheds remained, but some were demolished and trampled over with those horses. And he sold 9 acres, this Mr. Sini, 9 acres to Joey and Sammy Said, next to me, and the leftover of that 14 acres was my 5 acres. So they had 9, I had 5, and the house. So then the acreage eventually became useful for running a cow and having a few other little things. Have some chickens, a bit of a garden next to the house. Somebody with a rotary hoe came in, chopped it all up, and then we watered it by hand. Then another Maltese was in the business of making skinner pipes with little sprinklers in them. So you connect it up, and we didn't have to do it by hand anymore. So we had sprinkler pipes. It was in front of the house. And we were going to grow potatoes there. This was their first year. Now, it all became a flop. And we quick enough said, oh, if we need any vegetables, we only have to go next door. Those Maltese were growing all sorts of vegetables, partly potatoes. So potatoes we bought from a stall on the Western Highway near in Eastern Creek again.
So what was the house like when you
and
bought
the
it?
house was then, yeah, very untidy, or what do you call it, a mess. But we cleaned it up from whatever mess they'd made. But using all that water to wash the walls down, and there was cracks in the floors everywhere, so the water would just run down and down the slope. Then it dried up. By that time, that would have been a couple of weeks before Mum and Dad came. Yeah, then we would have put the furniture in there, as the house was. Because they had some loose carpets, I think.
Didn't you say someone was going to painted it?
Yeah, but we painted it actually when they were living in it.
Oh, okay. So it was.
Because Thea was then.
They just moved into the house the way it was.
They moved in at the end of November, or no,
December.
Just before Christmas.
Mm.
And pretty soon Anders and Thea arrived with the 3 kids.
Yeah.
There were 2 boys, 3 boys. Anyway, and Thea being quite industrious, bought a couple of tins of paint, I remember, and she made little strips around and decorated the house up a bit and gave it a little bit more of a homely. Yeah, and things were hung up. They had a number of wall cloth, something, and we hanged it here and there to dress up the room a bit and make it homely. Because Australians don't do that, and those Maltese especially don't do that. They just live in the house.
Mm.
There's no beauty. There might be a mirror somewhere, but that's about it, in the calendar.
So was the floorboards, were there holes in the floorboards and everything?
Yeah,
Did
they
that
were just timber floors, but being old, there was cracks everywhere.
Mm.
And so there was lino on top of that, so soon enough we bought new lino. And that was the time then that you needed those things, so then you found out where can we get those things. So by that time Luke Huisjes had already established himself and he was selling anything. So he was also an agent for floor coverings. So Luke would come up and measured up, and then somebody came to lay the lino.
Yeah.
And who did the laying of lino was Jan Savelberg, who worked for that company where, in Blacktown. Anyway, so then the new lino was laid, and it made it again a little bit more finished. And whatever carpet we had on the floor, I can't really remember, there would have been loose carpets that they rolled out, something like this type of thing.
Yeah, all right.
I think, but I have no recollection of that.
Mm.
Yeah, so then we lived there, but then everybody went to work. Is that the right? So then.
Yeah, what did they work? What were they doing? What was their first jobs?
Yeah, your father and Gerrit went then to that Minchbury wine business.
And Penfolds?
Penfolds wine.
Mm-hmm.
So did Dad. The girls had already a job with the Bimala in Ryde, and the younger ones went to school.
Mm-hmm.
That was about it.
This November we will be celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Van Bentums arriving in Australia. So after all this time, do you think it was the right decision?
It must have been, because we were all settled in very well, and I haven't heard many people complain that we made that decision. No, I think overall it's been a success.
Yeah.
We all settled, family grew up here, there's no reason to go back, as maybe sentimental reasons, but we've done. You know,
Yeah.
Most of us have been back once or twice, or maybe even more. So then you evaluate the country there and here. Well, where would you want to live? No, not in the cold weather there,
Yeah.
rather have the warm weather here. All sorts of little things that you then consider. So that the result is that we stayed here.
And most of the families seem to have started their own businesses or have been quite successful in
the ones who married, whatever they then did, they, like you said before, nobody got rich, but we all had a decent income. We could please ourselves, coming and going, have a holiday.
Yeah, I think the family in Australia seem to be very close. because we all lived in the same area, and because they did depend on each other, and they all helped each other
and they
out.
must have been of a mind and in the mood of not going against it. You know, that they sort of disagreed.
Mm.
You know, we all were pretty united, actually without talking about it.
Yeah.
I can't remember that going to one another, now we better do this together, otherwise nothing will happen. But nothing like that, that just happened.
Yeah.
So was that then the mum and dad being here, and you do it as a family, your loyalty to it all, extended into the church affairs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's basically what happened.
Yeah. I think we stayed strong as being together.
Yeah.
And especially as Christians as well, I think.
Yeah, overall, and I'm not the one to talk about it much either, but there must have been a leading of the Lord to be committed to all that and not waver or wander off, and be sort of focused on one thing and keep plodding along and keep doing that. You know, why otherwise, the same as me getting married at 49. All of a sudden, why am I in, not the mood, but ready to face up to that? Well, before I could never see a way out, but I never had a problem either of being single. You know, it wasn't a burden. I didn't know any difference. Yeah.
Thank you. That's good.
Is that good enough?
That's very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for doing that for us.
Yeah.
I'm sure the family will really appreciate it later on when they can see why we came to Australia as Van Bentums.
Yeah, and the idea was that everybody gets a CD.
Yeah.
And so you keep that and you can replay that or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Enjoy.
And the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, especially those with the Van Bentum name, I think that later on they will appreciate and try to understand why we were here in Australia.
Yeah, because they, a certain time, maybe through the girls, the women they involved in, married to, they might say, they might ask me different times, what made you go? So in a similar fashion, I would say I wasn't happy there, or in a way I was happy. You wanted something different,
yeah,
bit of challenge, maybe a bit of adventure, all those things together. You have to sort of get into it and do it.
Yeah.
And that at the moment, that would be the last thing that I would do.
Of course,
things
of
like
course.
that. But now you're talking about, what was it, 26 and 88. You make different decisions.
But a big step for Opa and Oma too, because they were in their 50s, weren't they, when they came out?
Yeah, they were 51.
That's a big thing.
And that would have come out in the conversation too, that Opa apparently was also looking for a way out. And thought that migration maybe will solve some of that tension or the tightness or whatever, and come here and give it another go here.
Yeah.
And I think that he was very relieved from all the burdens maybe of...
Yeah, financially as well.
But if you then think of it, if we would have stayed in Holland, and I've thought that sometimes, what would have happened to us? If you then look to all the Dutch people who remain, they're doing well there too.
Yeah.
So we would have been part and parcel of that sort of
lifestyle.
We
wouldn't have known
it would have been totally different than here, probably, but we would never know the difference.
No, exactly.
Whatever jobs they would have had. And so your father would have never been a silver textile, it would be something else.
Well, on behalf of the first generation Australians, we're very grateful to be here.
Okay, it was a pleasure doing all this.
Thank you.